On a sunny afternoon, Chip the Manx lay sprawled across his favorite patch of sunlight on the guest bed. His fluffy bed was a gift from Mom a few Christmases ago, and although it was worn from daily naps, it was still his favorite. His short, tabby-colored fur was all warm and toasty. His yellow-green eyes drooped halfway shut as he listened to the sounds of the house. Birds chirping right outside the window, the hum of the fridge, and the quiet pitter-patter of paws on the floor. "Chip," came a voice all cheerful. It was Biskit, his best friend and partner in crime. The fluffy calico hopped up beside him, her tail flicking back and forth like a feather duster. "Ever wonder where your tail went?" Chip blinked at her lazily. He was about to sleep and wasn't in the mood for Biskit's random questions again. "I didn't lose it, Biskit, remember? Mom says I was born this way." Biskit tilted her head, her whiskers twitching. She was full of energy, and Chip wasn't ready for that right now. Sure, but what if someone took it? What if it was stolen? There was a silence for a moment. Chip's eyes suddenly jolted open all the way. Stolen? Chip sat up straight, his ears twitching at the idea. "Yes, I've heard whispers of a tail thief," Biskit said dramatically, her tail curling, a smile across her mouth. "They sneak in at night, stealing tails from unsuspecting cats. Maybe that's what happened to yours." Chip thought for a moment, then realized that there was no way this could be real. He chuckled. "You're making that up, Biskit. Leave me alone. I'm trying to nap." "Am I?" Biskit replied with a playful smirk. "I heard Mr. Whiskers talking about it. He said the tail thieves live in Shadow Alley." "Shadow Alley?" Chip repeated, his curiosity now fully awake. Has Chip heard of this place before? He thought he had, but wasn't sure. He hopped down from the sunspot and stretched his legs. "Well, if there's a tail thief out there, maybe I should find them and get some answers, right?" Maybe Biskit was full of it, but he never had an answer for having no tail. This may be his chance. Biskit gasped, her eyes wide with excitement. "You're really gonna look for the tail thief?" "Well, if it's a real thing, why not?" Chip said with more confidence. "If there's a mystery, I'll solve it. And who knows, maybe I'll find my tail after all." With a swish of her own tail, Biskit jumped down to follow him. "You're gonna need backup, and lucky for you, I'm the best detective around." Together, Chip and Biskit padded off, their paws making soft thumps on the floor. The adventure was just beginning, and neither of them could guess the twists and turns that lay ahead. Hopefully, they'd get their adventure finished before dinner time. Now, Chip and Biskit made their way through the house, their nose twitching as they sniffed out clues. Biskit led the way, her tail swishing with excitement. "First stop," she declared, "Mr. Whiskers. He knows everything." Now, Mr. Whiskers wasn't just any cat. He was the neighborhood's wise elder, a grizzled tabby with a torn ear and a coat marked by years of adventures. All the younger cats came to him for advice, whether it was catching mice or dealing with the mysterious vacuum monster. But Mr. Whiskers didn't live indoors like most of the other cats. He had claimed the cozy space under the old oak tree in the yard as his domain. "Do you think he'll even be there?" Chip asked as they approached the back door. Biskit flicked her tail. "He's always there. I always see him when I watch the squirrels. He's probably napping in the sun, waiting for us to bring him some excitement." The two cats squeezed through the slightly open screen door and headed toward the porch. The yard stretched before them, dotted with dandelions and buzzing with bees. The oak tree's broad branches cast cool shadows, and there, in the sunlight, sat Mr. Whiskers. His golden eyes opened lazily as the pair approached. Well, he trod, stretching one paw out in front of him. "If it isn't the dynamic duo, what brings you to my neck of the yard?" "We need your help," Biskit said, hopping up on a nearby rock to look him in the eye. "It's about the tail thief." Mr. Whiskers' ears perked up, and he leaned forward with sudden interest. He looked to the left, then to the right. His voice lowered. "The tail thief? Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time." Chip's tail stump twitched. He could feel some anxiety going on in his belly. "Do you know where we can find them? I'm looking for my tail." The old cat's whiskers twitched thoughtfully. "Shadow Alley," he said slowly, his voice almost a whisper. "That's where they're said to lurk. but it's no place for young ones like you. If I were you, I'd scamper back inside and just take a nap. We're not afraid, Biskit declared, puffing out her chest. We're ready for anything. Chip could almost feel the energy bounding off Biskit. She never thought through situations like this, but this could be an opportunity like no other. Chip intently watched Mr. Whiskers, and he seemed to be thinking hard. Mr. Whiskers then chuckled, a low rumbling sound that showed his ears. Bold, aren't you? Well, if you're gonna get set on going, you'll need this. He reached under a pile of fallen leaves with his paw and carefully dragged out a shiny silver key tied to a red string. Chip and Biskit looked at each other for a moment, confused. What's it for? Chip asked, taking the key gently in his mouth. He pulled it towards him and looked down, analyzing the scratched up metal key. The tailed thief's hiding place, Mr. Whiskers explained, his golden eyes seeming to be recalling a memory. You'll know when to use it, but remember, things in Shadow Alley aren't always what they seem. Chip and Biskit exchanged determined glances. They thanked Mr. Whiskers and headed toward the furthest part of the yard, where the shadows grew darker and the path to Shadow Alley began. Now, the path to Shadow Alley was lined with overgrown bushes and fallen leaves that crunched under their paws. Biskit pranced ahead, her calico fur flashing like a patchwork of sunlight and shadows fitting for this adventure. Chip followed, his green eyes scanning every corner cautiously. Are you sure we're going the right way? Chip asked, pausing to sniff a suspicious-looking rock. Of course I'm sure, Biskit replied. She hopped onto a tree stump and struck her heroic pose. My instincts are never wrong. Chip raised an eyebrow. Biskit, you got stuck in the trash can last week because your instincts told you there was a snack inside. Biskit giggled and rolled her eyes. That's different. There was a snack. I just didn't think through the exit strategy. Chip couldn't help but chuckle to himself as they continued on. The closer they got to Shadow Alley, the quieter the world seemed to become. Even the birds in the background faded, replaced by the distant rustle of leaves. I don't like this, Chip muttered, his tail stump twitching. It's too quiet. Quiet means we're getting closer, Biskit said, her voice dropping. We're fearless adventurers, right? Practically fearless, Chip echoed, though his ears remained perked up for any sign of danger. Inside, his thoughts were a little less certain. What am I even doing? He wondered. What if I find my tail and it doesn't feel right? What if it doesn't even matter? The doubts gnawed at him, but he pushed them aside, focusing instead on following Biskit. As they rounded a corner, Shadow Alley came into view. It was narrow, dimly lit, and a path that squeezed between two tall fences, littered with old crates and some forgotten toys. The air smelled dusty and like damp wood, something Chip couldn't quite place. It made his fur stand up. This is it, Biskit whispered, her voice tinged with excitement. It's creepier than I imagined, Chip admitted. Biskit grinned. Creepy makes it fun. Chip sighed. Let's just stick together, okay? Always, Biskit said, nudging him playfully before leading the way into the alley. The two padded cautiously down the narrow path, their ears flicking back at every small sound. Shadows danced on the wooden fence as a breeze pushed through, making Chip's heart race. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all, he thought. But when he glanced at Biskit, her naive confidence pushed him forward. If she can handle this, so can I. Hey, Chip, Biskit whispered as they approached an overturned crate. What do you think the tail thief looks like? Do you think they are tailless too? Chip's thoughts stalled. He hadn't considered that possibility. Maybe, he said quietly. Or maybe they have 100 tails they've collected from all the cats they've tricked. Biskit's eyes widened. She let out a nervous giggle. Okay, now you're just trying to freak me out. Chip smirked, trying to lighten the mood so he didn't look afraid. Maybe I am. A sudden clang echoed through the alley, making both cats leap into the air. They landed in a tangled heap, their fur sticking straight up. What was that? Biskit hissed, her eyes darting around. Probably just a tin can falling, Chip replied, though his voice wavered. He naturally has always been Biskit's big brother, her protector. He was starting to doubt why he let her coerce him into this. "Come on," Biskit said, shaking herself and stepping forward. "If we stop now, we'll never find them." Reluctantly, Chip followed. As the shadows deepened and the air grew cooler, Chip felt a familiar unease settle over him. The key dangled from his neck, clinking softly against his fur. "What do you think this key opens?" he asked, trying to distract himself from the eerie surroundings. Biskit trotted ahead. "Something important, obviously. Maybe a treasure chest. Or a secret lair filled with tuna cans." Chip couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. It helped him feel more at ease. "Or maybe it's just another dead end," he muttered under his breath, doubt creeping in. "What if this is all a waste of time?" They came to a clearing where an old, moss-covered statue of a cat stood, its paw raised up as if to greet them. At its base was a locked box, the edges worn and scratched, and a riddle was carved into the stone. "I have no wings, yet I can fly. I have no voice, yet I make you cry. I'm born in the sky, but live where I land. What am I?" Biskit tilted her head, reading the riddle aloud. "Easy," she declared. "It's a cloud." Chip frowned. "Are you sure? That seems too simple." He circled around the statue, thinking hard. "No wings, but can fly, born in the sky." Silence circled around them. Biskit stared at Chip, confusion in her eyes. Chip suddenly looked at her. His face lit up. "It's a raindrop!" "A raindrop?" Biskit raised an eyebrow. "That's boring. Clouds are bigger and fluffier." Ignoring her response, Chip placed the key into the lock on the box and turned it. With a satisfying click, the lid popped open to reveal a map, carefully folded and dotted with strange symbols. "What's that?" Biskit asked, peering over his shoulder. "It looks like it leads to Shadow Alley's center," Chip said, his heart racing. The map's path twisted and turned, marked by paw prints and a note that read, "Beware the mirror maze." Biskit grinned. "Ha, this just got interesting." Now Chip stared at the map, his earlier doubts melting away. Maybe this journey wasn't a waste of time. Maybe it was about more than getting his tail. With a deep breath, he folded the map and tucked it under his collar. "Let's go." Together, they ventured further into the shadows, ready to face whatever came next. The path grew narrower as they walked, the trees on either side bending over them. The air grew cooler, and Chip's paws tinkled against the damp ground. They came to a wide archway made of twisted vines, its entrance marked by a wooden sign that read, "Enter the mirror maze to know thyself." Biskit bounced on her paws, her eyes shining. "This is going to be fun. I bet it's full of all sorts of shiny stuff." "Or traps," Chip muttered softly, eyeing the dark passage nervously. His ears twitched as he caught the faint sound of wind howling through the maze. The moment they stepped inside, the world seemed to change. The walls shimmered with reflective glass, each surface casting countless versions of themselves. Biskit giggled, watching 100 calico tails swish back at her. "Look at me, I'm everywhere!" she exclaimed, spinning in circles. Chip, meanwhile, felt another pang of discomfort as he caught sight of his own reflection, or rather, his lack of a tail. "I don't like this," he murmured, avoiding his own gaze. "Relax," Biskit said, nudging her. "You're still you, tail or no tail. You're the smartest cat I know, and the best big brother." Her words warned him, but the maze seemed determined to test him. The reflections shifted and morphed, some showing him with a long, elegant tail, while others showed him looking smaller, unsure of himself. "Keep moving," Chip said, firmly leading the way. He didn't want to linger too long in this hall of mirrors. And then at last they came to the center of the maze. A pedestal stood there, and atop of it was a glimmering crystal shaped like a cat's tail. Surrounding it was an inscription that read, "To find what you seek, look within. The truth is not in what you lack, but in what you carry." Biskit tilted her head. "Huh? What does that mean?" Chip stared at the crystal tail, his reflection shimmering in its facets. Slowly understanding dawned on him. "It means I don't need a tail to be complete. I've always been enough, just the way I am." The key glinted in Chip's paw, its ornate design catching the faint light that filtered through the alley. He turned it over, studying its intricate details. It had swirling patterns etched along its length, a tiny engraving of a cat's paw at the base, and 3 faint words inscribed along the side. Heart finds home. What do you think this means? Chip muttered, tilting his head. This adventure was full of more riddles than he expected. Biskit leaned in close, squinting at the key. Looks like fancy mumbo-jumbo to me. Maybe it's just decoration. Chip frowned. Something about the words tugged at him, like a puzzle piece slipping into place but not fully connecting. No, it's important. Mr. Whiskers wouldn't have given it to us if it didn't matter. All right, Detective, Biskit said, plopping down and batting at a stray pebble. It gave us the map, remember? What's your brilliant theory? Chip stared at the engraving again, his mind racing. Heart finds home. Was it a clue? Or some kind of riddle? He thought back to the journey so far. Their encounter with Mr. Whiskers, the maze, and now this? Every step has been designed to test them, to make them think. Maybe it's about me, Chip said quietly. Biskit stopped batting a pebble on the ground and tilted her head. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's not just about finding the tail thief or my missing tail. Maybe it's about finding myself. Biskit blinked and then burst out laughing. That is the cheesiest thing I have ever heard. Chip's ears flattened, but he couldn't help but chuckle in response. I'm serious, Biskit. What if the key isn't just for a door, but is for something deeper, like figuring out what makes me special, even without a tail? Biskit smirked, but there was a flicker of understanding in her eyes. All right, philosopher, let's find out where this fancy key goes, and maybe you can solve the riddle of life while we're at it. The two continued down the alley, the cobblestones beneath their paws turning smoother and more worn. The buildings on either side loomed closer together, their cracked bricks glowing faintly in the dim light. Finally, they arrived at a dead end. In front of them stood a large weathered wooden door, its surface covered in scratch marks and carvings that seemed to shift and shimmer as they stared. Chip stepped forward, the key clutched tightly in his paw. This has to be it. Biskit raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? She looked around, but there was nothing else. They were at a dead end. Maybe there's something else? Ignoring her, Chip intently examined the door. At its center was a small keyhole, surrounded by more of those swirling patterns that matched the key. He hesitated, analyzing all the details. What if it doesn't work? Chip whispered, his voice barely audible. There's only way to find out, Biskit said, nudging him forward. Taking a deep breath, Chip slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. As he turned it, a soft click echoed through the alley, followed by a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the air. The door creaked open, revealing a glowing passageway filled with both light and shadows. It was as if the door led not to another alley, but to an entirely different world. Whoa, Biskit breathed. Chip took a cautious step forward, his paw brushing against the threshold. The light felt warm and inviting, like a sunny patch on a cold day. Ready? He asked, looking back at Biskit. She grinned. Let's find this tail thief and see what this whole heart finds home thing is really about. Together they stepped into the glowing passageway, their silhouettes disappearing into the light as the door creaked shut behind them. The glowing passageway opened into a sprawling meadow bathed in golden light. The grass was soft beneath their paws and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. In the distance stood a towering tree with sprawling branches that seemed to touch the sky. At its base sat a figure, sleek and shadowy with a long curling tail. Chip's heart skipped. The tail thief. Biskit tilted her head. Kind of dramatic, don't you think? As they approached, the figure raised its head, revealing a sleek black cat with piercing green eyes. The tail swished hypnotically, casting long shadows across the grass. Well, the cat purred, its voice smooth and rich. You've come a long way, little Manx. Chip stepped forward, his ears flattening. Are you the tail thief? The black cat chuckled, the sound echoing like wind through the trees. That's what they call me, but I don't steal tails. I keep them safe. Safe? Chip repeated, confused. The black cat rose gracefully, its tail curling around its paws. Every cat has a story, little one. Some stories are written in their fur, others in their tails. Yours is written in your spirit. You think you're missing something, but what you lack only makes you stronger. Biskit raised a skeptical eyebrow. Okay, but why the spooky riddles? And why the key? The black cat smirked. The journey was the key, not the object itself. It led you here, didn't it? And along the way, you've learned more about yourself than you ever thought possible. Chip looked down at his tail stump, then back at the black cat. So I was never supposed to get a tail back? Your tail is part of you, even if it isn't there, the black cat said gently. Just like the Manx cats before you, you're special because of who you are, not because of what you lack. Chip thought of Mr. Whisker's wisdom and Biskit's unwavering support, even when she teased him. Slowly, a sense of peace settled over him. So, I'm enough, he said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. The black cat nodded. You always were. Biskit nudged him from behind with her nose. See, told you there wasn't anything wrong with you. And if it helps, I think your tail stump is kind of cute. Chip let out a laugh, the first real laugh he'd had since their journey began. Thanks, Biskit. The black cat stepped aside and the glowing meadow began to fade. It's time for you to go home, little Manx. But remember, your story is just beginning. As the light around them dimmed, Chip and Biskit found themselves back in their yard, standing under the old oak tree. The silver key was gone, but Chip didn't feel the loss. He looked at Biskit, who was already sniffing at a butterfly. Ready for dinner? She said, her tail swishing. Chip grinned, his heart light. Yeah, let's go home. And as they padded back toward the house, Chip realized that home wasn't just a place. It was a feeling, a sense of belonging, just as he was. As Chip and Biskit climbed back through the open screen door into the house, the warm sense of their cozy home greeted them. Fresh laundry, a faint whiff of tuna, and the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath their paws. After dinner, Biskit jumped up onto the couch, sprawling across the cushions like she owned the place. Well, that was an adventure, she said, her tone casual, as if they'd just taken a stroll through the yard. Chip sat beside her, looking out the window where the moonlight was beginning to paint the yard in silvery light. His tail stump twitched. It really was. And you know what, Biskit? I don't think I could have done it without you. Biskit lifted her head, one eyebrow raised. Obviously, I did do all the heavy lifting. Chip laughed. Not exactly, but you did keep me going, even when I wasn't sure about all this. You never doubted that we'd figure it out. Why would I? Biskit said, smirking. You're the smart one, Chip. I knew you'd solve the riddles. I just made sure you didn't chicken out halfway through. Chip rolled his eyes, but his heart was happy. You know, for a cat who pretends not to care about anything, you're a pretty good friend. Biskit yawned dramatically. Don't get mushy on me now, Chip. It's bedtime, not story time. But Chip wasn't quite ready for sleep. He stretched out on the couch beside her, his mind replaying their journey. We met Mr. Whiskers, got the key, solved riddles, and then the tail thief. It was a lot. Oh boy, Biskit groaned, burying her nose under her paw. Here comes the moral of the story. I'm serious, Chip said, nudging her gently. It's like the black cat said, I don't need a tail to be special. I'm still me, smart, careful, and maybe even a little brave. Biskit peeked out from under her paw. And stubborn, don't forget stubborn. Chip grinned. Fine, I'll give you that. But it's not just about me. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You might not think things through all the time. Rude, Biskit interjected. But you make things fun, Chip continued. And you remind me to take chances, even when it's scary. For a moment, Biskit was quiet, her usual aloofness softening. Well, you keep me out of trouble, mostly. So I guess we're a good team. The best team, Chip agreed. They settled into the comfortable silence, the house quiet around them. Chip felt a warm glow in his chest, not just from the lessons he learned, but from the bond that he shared with Biskit. They were so different in many ways, but together, they balanced each other perfectly. Hey, Chip, Biskit murmured, her eyes closing. Yeah? Next time, let's go on an adventure that involves less thinking and more snacks. Chip chuckled, curling up beside her. Deal. As the moon climbed higher and their eyelids grew heavy, the two cats drifted off to sleep, side by side. The key might have been gone and the adventure over, but Chip knew one thing for sure. No matter what challenges came their way, as long as they had each other, they could face anything.